Okay, this is we're gonna call the meeting to order. I'm Dan Burke, one of the co-chairs of the Resolutions Committee, and we have with us Brent Bertrand as a co-host.
The other
co-chair. Sorry,
everybody.
we're not hosting. Curtis Chung is sort of an honorary co-chair of this committee, but he is the co-host as well.
Yeah.
So we got some business to do this morning. Resolutions are an important part of what we do in the NFB in terms of deciding, identifying things that are of concern to us, and determining action that we want to take and have others take to improve the lives of blind people. And so we have 8 resolutions this morning. Scott, before we go any further, do you want to make any comments as president of the NFB of Colorado?
No, not really, Dan. You've said it. This is important because this is what we set as our policy. Assuming that the convention adopts the resolutions that the committee recommends, it becomes our marching orders, and it's the kind of thing we work on in the coming year. We've pointed to over the years many of our resolutions that have become laws, such as the parental rights issue or the voting rights issues. So resolutions are not a formality. They truly are an important, critical part of the work we do. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Scott. So let's explain a little bit how we're going to do this in the virtual convention. So we have, as I said, we've had 8 resolutions submitted and reviewed and ready to go. And so normally we have Chris Parsons, who is our resolutions reader for the last number of years at conventions. Rather than have her read those live today, because she has a lot of other things she's going on with, she's actually recorded the resolutions in advance. And so our tech team has those ready, queued up to play those. We'll hear the recording of the resolution, discussion from the proponent of that particular resolution, and then we'll vote. The way we're going to vote is by voice vote. Only those people appointed to this committee by President Scott LaBarre are permitted to vote. And they're appointed based on their affiliation with a chapter and or a division. So each division and chapter of the NFB of Colorado has a representative on this committee. So we will ask those folks to be prepared to vote when the time comes. So now we're going to turn it over to Brent. So we'll do a little roll call to make sure we got everybody here from that appointment list.
I want to make sure that we have everybody that is representing a chapter or division is present. So if you could just let me know that it is in fact you. So the at-large chapter, I have Renee Anderson.
Yes, I'm here.
Aurora is Curtis Chong.
Present.
Boulder Valley, I have Marianne Migliorelli.
Present, and fabulous pronunciation.
It's fun to say.
I know, everybody likes it.
Colorado Springs, I have Jeanette Fortin.
I'm here.
Denver chapter, I have Vicki Hedrick.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Greeley, I have JJ Aragon.
Present.
My chapter, Gary Van Dorn.
Present.
North Metro, Michelle Chacon.
Good morning. I'm here.
Excellent. Pueblo, I have Sandy Schleich.
I'm here.
In the Wild West, I have Nate Hecker.
Yep, I'm here.
Blind Parents is Sean Spears.
Here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. CABS, the Colorado Association of Blind Students, I have Cynthia Coppin.
Yes, I'm here.
And the Blind Merchants, I have Pippi Adams.
Good morning.
Excellent. In Coagdu, Melissa Green.
Yes, I'm here.
COPDC, the Parents of Blind Children. Is there a representative, Amira, possibly?
Anyone from the blind parents here this morning?
No, you mean parents of blind children.
Oh, you're right. Parents of blind
Yeah,
children.
parents
Sorry.
of blind children.
This is Kyle. I can sit in for Mayor. I'm her husband.
Okay.
Well said, Kyle.
All right.
Most don't get that privilege.
Yeah, you may face the consequences later. We don't know yet.
Yeah, but
I'm sure.
we're back.
I'm sure I will.
We're backing you right now, Kyle. You're good.
All right. Thank you.
We have
Uh,
your back. We'll be right behind you when.
And then the deaf-blind division, I have Dula Jarbo.
I am here.
Excellent. And seniors,
Diane
Diane-
George. Is she here?
I saw her join.
Yeah. She may be muted.
She's muted, guys.
okay, so she's here. That's great. Excellent. And sports and recreation. Oh,
There
hey,
she is.
Diane.
Good morning,
Hi.
Diane.
Good morning. Good morning. I was eating my breakfast before this, so I had my phone muted. Yes, I'm here. That's fine. I can serve on resolutions.
All right.
Thank you.
And sports and recreation, we have Jody Whithouse.
Present.
Did I miss any divisions?
I
All
think,
right.
I think this is the
covers it.
first time that I know of that we've had all the chapters and all the divisions represented at the meeting. So congratulations.
That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's usually somebody missing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, see, the problem is they get stuck in the hotel restaurant and, or they have problems checking in. We don't have to deal with any of that this year. Yay.
Or
That's
the
right.
or the committee room is in some labyrinthine corner of the
Yeah,
hotel
yeah,
that nobody can find.
True story there.
Okay.
And so just a reminder that this meeting is just for committee members to vote. Later on in the convention, we will all have our chance, those that are registered to vote.
Excellent. I'm excited. I always love the resolutions part of any convention. And so let's get going, shall we? The first resolution is Resolution 2020-01 regarding the, let's see, now I have to read this, don't I? Regarding improvements to the, I've forgotten what it was about, otherwise I'd just fake it. Accessible,
There you go.
accessible online voting balloting system that we're using here in Colorado. So Curtis Chong is the proponent for this. Let's hear the resolution.
Resolution 2020-01 regarding improvements to the accessible online ballot marking system in Colorado. Whereas, since SB 19-202, a bill introduced by Senator Jesse Danielson and championed by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, was signed into law by Governor Polis in 2019, registered voters in Colorado with a disability, as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, have been able to use the access technology with which they are familiar to privately and independently mark the printed mail ballot using a computer, smartphone, or tablet, an internet connection, and a printer. And whereas Colorado's new accessible online ballot marking system provides an equivalent voting option to Colorado's vote by mail system for voters with disabilities in Colorado who are otherwise not able to mark the printed mail ballot without assistance, or who, for reasons of health or difficulty obtaining transportation, are not able to travel to a voter service and polling center. And whereas Colorado's accessible online ballot marking system requires the voter with a disability to print the marked ballot and a ballot application, to sign the ballot application, which has already been filled out, and to deliver the two documents by mail or in person to his or her county clerk or an authorized voter service and polling center. And whereas the ubiquitous nature of the internet, combined with the availability of electronic content delivery systems, have reduced the use of printers in our society, so much so that the average person is unlikely to own a printer, let alone have ready access to one. And whereas voters with disabilities who do not own or have ready access to a printer are prevented from using Colorado's accessible online ballot marking system. Whereas registered Colorado voters who serve in the military or who live overseas, so-called UOCAVA voters, have the opportunity to submit their voted ballots using fax, email, or a secure web portal. And whereas, as good as the accessible online ballot marking system is in Colorado, the requirement for a voter with a disability to own or have ready access to a printer deprives many voters of the benefits that this new system has to offer. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado in convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020, that this organization call upon the Colorado General Assembly, the Governor of Colorado, and the Colorado Secretary of State to work with the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado and other interested parties to make it possible for registered Colorado voters with disabilities to submit their voted ballots and ballot applications electronically using a system that is secure, convenient, and fully accessible.
Okay.
So, Curtis?
So when we first started this last year, I modeled it after the New Mexico and Maryland and other state models. But we have learned that a goodly number of folks don't have printers. And therefore, in this modern age where, paper printing seems to be falling out of fashion, at least in certain circles, unless you work for the federal government or something like that, we think that a secure, accessible system is possible. As a matter of fact, it has been piloted in other places. So it's time for us to take the next step toward accessible voting and to improve the system so that more of us can use it without having to own a printer. So I recommend the committee pass this on to be considered by the convention.
Thank you very much.
Move passage.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second. I'll second that.
Okay, and that was Renee?
That was Sandy.
Sandy, I'm sorry, thank you. Is there further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, resolution 2020-01 is recommended to pass.
Excellent. Thank you all. And so what we should speak about that for a minute. Recommending do pass means we send this to the floor of the convention. We'll consider those as an entire convention tomorrow. It's on the agenda, and everybody gets to vote on. We don't say we recommend do pass, is what we do. And that requires a motion and a vote and any discussion that goes along with that. Having just voted and having had to find a printer, it's obviously an important thing for us to be considering. So moving on to resolution 2020-02. And this is regarding
Text to cure.
Text to cure, the new text to cure system implemented by the Secretary of State. So let's hear the resolution.
Resolution 2020-02 regarding non-visual access to Colorado's text to cure system. Whereas in a press release dated October 7th, 2020, Secretary of State Jena Griswold announced that Text to Cure, a service which enables voters to fix signature discrepancies on their ballot, a process known as curing the ballot, with their smartphones, would be used in conjunction with the November 3rd, 2020 general election. And whereas, according to the press release, with Text to Cure, if voters are notified of a ballot signature discrepancy, they can text Colorado to vote 28638 and click on the link that is sent back as a reply. Voters then enter their voter ID number printed on the rejection notice they received from their county election office, affirm they returned a ballot for the election, sign the affidavit on their phone, take a photo of an acceptable form of ID, and select Submit to transmit this information to their county clerk. And whereas, had the Office of the Secretary of State consulted with the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado during the early phases of text to cure development, the following information would have been conveyed. 1. Writing one's signature on a smartphone touchscreen is a non-starter today with screen reading software. A new approach must be created. 2. Photographing an identification card or anything else non-visually with a smartphone requires enough information to be conveyed to the screen reading software to help the non-visual user to properly position the camera. This requires additional information from mainstream software that it is not yet designed to provide. And whereas, while it is true that text to cure is a new way to help voters resolve signature issues with their ballots and does not take away the more tried and true methods of ballot curing already available, the release of a new ballot curing system, which at the outset is not accessible to blind voters, can hardly be viewed as an affirmation of Secretary Griswold's publicly expressed commitment to safe, secure, and accessible elections. And whereas the failure to incorporate accessibility into the early development phases of text to cure exemplifies an all too familiar and unnecessary pattern in which accessibility is bolted on after something has been developed, oftentimes with a good deal of grumbling and resistance. And whereas when accessibility is included in new systems at the start of the design process, the result is lower cost and less retrofitting. And whereas this latest problem with text to cure is surprising and disappointing in light of the positive working relationship that has developed over the past year and a half between the Office of the Secretary of State and the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado. Now, therefore be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado in convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020, that this organization express its great concern with the decisions made by the Office of Colorado's Secretary of State, Jena Griswold, which led to the release and dissemination of a system, text to cure, which in violation of state and federal law is not accessible to blind voters. And be it further resolved that this organization express its disappointment with Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold for the failure of her office to work proactively with the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado to anticipate, if not resolve, non-visual access issues around the text to cure system. And be it further resolved that this organization request that Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold and her office work closely with the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado to develop and implement innovative strategies to ensure that current and future software deployed on behalf of Colorado voters is fully accessible to everyone on the day of its release.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Resolutions Committee, let me say that this is yet another example of the idea that people can bolt accessibility onto something after they've decided to implement it. We received no official word from the Secretary of State at all that this system was going to be released to the public, nor any inquiry from that office as to whether or not text to cure would be usable by blind voters. What we did get, well, let me, if you want to go back into distant history, early last year in 2019, there was this big meeting in the city of Denver. They usually have these where you get to see, talk about voting solutions for the future. And there was a little upstart company there that talked about signing on a smartphone, and I got up publicly and said that that process was absolutely not accessible to people who used screen readers on smartphones, and that that was a non-starter for us. So that was the first indication. And the second indication about all of this was that the company who developed this software, without informing us that they were actually working with the state of Colorado, came to me and asked me to try their system and alleged that the system was going to be usable by blind people with absolutely no practical experience to verify that within their own staff. And so it came as kind of a surprise to them when I told them that both of the processes could not be used if you were running speech on your iPhone. So based on that information and the failure of the Office of the Secretary of State to communicate with us, I think we need to recommend that this resolution pass on to the convention.
Thank you, Curtis. Is there a motion to pass this resolution?
Move to pass. Vicky, I make a motion to pass the resolution.
It's been moved.
Diane, somebody else did too.
LaBarre.
Scott?
Yes, it's very interesting what has transpired in the last, I guess 14 hours or so. Yesterday, I've been dealing with the Secretary of State's office in terms of the logistics of Jena Griswold showing up at the convention later on. And as a courtesy, I thought I would send over the resolutions that we were considering. Then both Curtis and I, about half an hour after I did that, received urgent calls from the Deputy Secretary of State. And he was quite upset about this resolution. And he was urging us not to adopt it officially because they want to have a chance to fix this problem. Now, Curtis actually spoke to, I don't remember his last name, but the
Ian
deputy
Rader, right? Yeah.
Rader,
Yeah.
Deputy Secretary Rader. I was in the process of getting ready for the opening ceremony when he was frantically calling us. And so I didn't talk to him, but it is the case that apparently, if we're willing not to officially adopt this as a convention, we are guaranteed a meeting outside of this convention with the secretary, not only to work on this issue, but the first resolution. And I wanted to bring that information to the convention with the following recommendation. We have not nailed down this deal yet, but if we do indeed get an actual meeting with the secretary and have the ability to address this issue, I would recommend that we not pass it on tomorrow, but I do want this committee to at least move it forward to the convention so that we have that opportunity if this deal falls apart, if you will. Now, one of the, we've been trying to get a meeting with Secretary Griswold for over a year. And so I think if we get an actual it'll be Zoom to Zoom meeting. I think we can get significant progress on this issue. And of course, if we don't, we can always come back with another resolution. But I think what we need to do is pass this out of committee with the idea that there may be the situation that we would not pass it as a convention because of whatever deal we have struck with the Secretary of State's office. So that I just wanted the committee to have all of the information and to know where we currently stand. It's fascinating, though. The Deputy Secretary Rader told Curtis that he was very familiar with the National Federation of the Blind because he had worked for Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and he knows that if we want to, we can cause the Secretary of State's office a lot of trouble. So anyway, I think that is a recognition of the kind of clout and ability we have been able to marshal over the years in terms of gaining respect and being known as an authoritative voice speaking on behalf of blind people. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what I would recommend to the committee.
Dan
Well,
Dorn.
Scott, I'm sorry, Dan, but thank you, Scott, very much. And it really does show you the power that we hold as the NFB, but also the importance of these resolutions. Dan, you had something to add?
I was only going to add that we've at last learned how to get an appointment with Secretary Griswold. That's beneficial.
Yeah.
We'll
All
see
right.
if that's a tried and true strategy, won't we?
It remain,
Good
yeah.
work, Curtis. Good work. And so it has been moved and seconded, and we've heard from both Curtis and Scott. All in favor of this
Van
resolution.
Dorn, before we
Van-
vote,
Yeah. Do we have
I have
more?
a comment.
Yeah.
I agree with what Scott's saying, but with my work with RTD, I'm beginning to feel a little trend, and this is feeding into this trend I'm believing in. I almost feel like we're being blackmailed. Is that we know you're powerful. We don't like this resolution because it embarrasses us. You caught us. Otherwise, we would have done it. And so now we're embarrassed and we need to do the politically correct thing. And I almost feel as though we even pass it, then the state will punish us by not working with us. So I feel it's a form of blackmail. Scott, I do
Curtis
agree
Chong.
with what you say. And of course, I will support this resolution, and I'll even support withdrawing it on the floor if that's what it takes. But this is my feeling.
Chong.
Curtis.
Yeah.
Let me say that my feeling about this is not quite as strong as I feel we were pressured. Yes, I do. I feel that our power at the national level is respected. Yes, I do. I think this is, in my opinion, a strategic move on our part to get something that we've wanted for a long time, and we finally found the way to do it, which is to sort of criticize and be unhappy about something. If that garners us a meeting with Jenna, that will be a good thing. And ultimately, in the end, we want to elevate our relationship with that office to the point where we have a good relationship with her, not just people on her staff. They have fobbed us off on lower level functionaries, if I may say, who are very good people and nice to work with. But consistently throughout this whole thing, Jenna has never come to talk to us, even though, frankly, without our efforts here in Colorado, we would never have achieved the leadership status in accessible voting that we now hold in this country. So they ought to be thanking us for this. And I don't feel in the least that we're being blackmailed. I think of this as a strategic mechanism on our part to get what we want. And that's why I support the resolution.
And I would add to that, that if we well, who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of days, but assuming they do agree to a meeting and we do withdraw the resolution, and assuming we have the meeting and the issue does not get resolved, we're not going anywhere, and this issue won't go away, and we have the ability to bring it back and to take whatever action we feel we need to take. But anyway, you've got a couple of people there, Mr. Chairman, that are urgently seeking the floor.
I hear Aragon and then Willoughby.
I just wanted to throw in there, given the progress that we made with DVR over the last few years and how everything has progressed, I've got every faith in the NFB of Colorado to respond to the blackmail or the anything else that's going on here. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks. Curtis. Willoughby.
I can speak personally for the cooperativeness and interestedness in the subject of voting on the part of people in the Secretary of State's office, and I would like to present another alternative to not passing the resolution. We say we're going to pass the resolution all the way through the convention, but we're not going to publicize it if things work out well. That way, if things don't work out well, we can always go public with it.
John Perret.
John Perret. I was going to introduce you in a second. John, welcome to the Resolutions Committee meeting.
Yeah,
the man who is very much responsible for the fact that the Deputy Secretary of State knows who we are in the NFB.
I do know Debbie Wasserman Schultz quite well, and a lot of the staff there. So, and that's actually in NFB of Florida. Kudos to them for the work they did. To now, it's interesting how this is fitting together with the NFB of Colorado. But I'll just say that sometimes the threat of a resolution, similar to the threat of a protest, is when you're in your strongest position. So once you actually follow through and pass the resolution, or the same thing can happen with a press release or a protest. A lot of times then you're not as in strong a position. So not passing it, but continuously threatening to pass it, I find puts you in a stronger position. It puts them in a position to want to prevent the passage, to try to work with you. So I really like the proposal that Scott has as a way to move forward.
Worley,
Kevin?
Worley. I think we're probably going to vote pretty quick, but I respect my colleague Curtis Willoughby. I think once we officially pass any motion or resolution from this convention, it's public. The reason you pass a resolution, we get to the point tomorrow where we actually pass this resolution, it's time to make it a policy of the National Federation of the Blind and start working at it. So I don't ever favor passing a resolution and then just kind of keeping it tucked away in our back pocket.
Thank you,
Call for the
Kevin.
question.
And someone called for the question. Someone else.
Yeah,
called.
like let's take a vote.
Yep.
All right. So it is been moved and seconded. We've had discussion. All in favor of passing this resolution out of committee, please say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? All right. Thank you.
The resolution passes. All right. Well, John Perret, I was going to, at this point, just introduce you and welcome you to the Resolutions Committee. You've already contributed to us, and directly today and indirectly by your work with.
Maybe to say thanks, Dan. I agree with everything that Scott said. The resolutions are a critical element of the policy. It's our marching orders for the National Federation of the Blind, and at all the different levels, national, state, and even if you have a chapter resolution. So it's this is always some of the most, for me, some of the most interesting meetings that occur, and I always appreciate the discussion that occurs around the various resolutions. So it's exciting for me to be able to participate in this meeting.
It's great to have you. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on now to NFB of Colorado Resolution 2020-03. This has to do with restoring transit services that were reduced as a result of the COVID-19 situation in this year. So I'm going to announce the proponent for this is Gary Van Dorn, and we'll hear the resolution, and Gary can speak to the resolution. I hope you say it speaks for itself, Gary. I just love to hear that. Okay.
Resolution 2020-03 regarding the restoration of transit service after service reductions due to COVID-19. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has caused tremendous upheavals in our state, our country, and around the world. And in many cases, it will take several years before a full recovery from some of its negative effects will occur. And whereas, because of the pandemic, mass transit providers across the state of Colorado have experienced significant losses in revenue, forcing them to drastically cut service and eliminate some fixed routes altogether. And whereas it has been estimated that more than 70% of the blind population is either unemployed or underemployed, and for the blind community as a whole, public transportation is often the only affordable means of traveling to work, getting to school, and visiting with family or friends. And whereas although ride-sharing services such as Uber and Lyft may be available to blind people in metropolitan areas, they are either too expensive for some people or simply not available, as is the case in rural parts of the state. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado in convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020, that this organization declare unequivocally that while service reductions forced upon transportation providers by the COVID-19 pandemic, in light of current funding shortfalls, might be understandable in the present moment, they should by no means become permanent. And be it further resolved that this organization work with the Colorado General Assembly and Colorado's congressional delegation to ensure that Colorado's various transit agencies have sufficient funding to enable them to restore or exceed the level of service provided prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Gary?
Gary?
Yes. The discussion currently before RTD is how they will restore service. They recognize they're going to have to do it, but frankly, they are in trouble. And the last I heard, they're looking at $165 million shortfall. Although recently the Leeds School of Economics says that they're looking for an upturn and return to normal revenues at least in late 2021. RTD a couple weeks back had a proposal that did not pass out of committee that they would look at the January 2020 run board, and that is basically the schedule, they call it a run board, would be the baseline by which they would restore service. It did not pass because more of the conservative members of the board felt that that would actually obligate them to return immediately to that level of service, even though that's not what the motion stated. My motion, I think, is pretty clear. It covers not only the Denver region, not only the regional transportation district that covers the 8 metropolitan Denver counties, but I believe it also covers the smaller providers, the city-owned providers such as Pueblo, the Springs, the Fort, Greeley, Grand Junction, and other parts of our state, but also covers Mustang. It also addresses the lack of transit in the rural areas of our state.
2 notifications.
Thank you.
Thank you,
John
Gary.
moves if the resolution be recommended to pass, be passed, whatever.
Is it moved? Seconded?
Mute that one, Paul.
Vicky, I second.
Okay, so
Second.
moved,
Trying to figure
seconded.
out who it is.
I second. I'm Nick Becker.
Okay, and is there other discussion?
Or longer, which it won't, period.
All right,
I will just.
moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the recommends do pass.
Excellent. Just want to remind folks, if you're in a noisy environment, you try and keep, I know you can't always, if we're going to vote, but try and keep things muted if you can. Okay. Resolution 2020-04. This is regarding access to COVID-19 testing, and the proponent is Nate Trila. So let's hear the resolution.
Resolution 2020-04 regarding access to COVID-19 testing. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has been recognized as the cause of death of more than 215,000 Americans and more than 2,000 Coloradans. And whereas the U.S. Centers for Disease Control has published guidelines calling for anyone with known exposure to COVID-19 to seek testing to help track the disease's spread and possibly alert them to the need to quarantine. And whereas the city and county of Denver is the only municipality in the state with a mobile testing solution for transit-dependent people that will come to homes. And whereas outside of Denver, a transit-dependent person must visit a testing site, meaning they would need to take ride shares, public transit, or taxis to get testing. And whereas quarantine orders from local health departments for possible exposure explicitly bar people with suspected exposure from taking public transit, ride shares, or taxis. And whereas the terms of service for most rideshare operators now say riders could lose their access to the service if they ride while aware of a possible COVID infection, possibly taking away a crucial tool of independence for the blind. And whereas most testing locations do not allow for pedestrians to get tested, and whereas even if locations offering tests to walk-ups can choose to not allow symptomatic individuals to enter buildings for testing, requiring patients to undergo testing outdoors without any privacy during the procedure. And whereas many of Colorado's blind must choose among options that include violating health department orders, sacrificing privacy, possibly losing future access to public transit, ride shares or taxis, or asking a friend or family member to risk exposure by driving a possibly infected individual for testing. Therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado in convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020 that this organization call upon state officials and local health departments to develop testing systems and services that provide the state's more than 1 million transit-dependent people, including the blind, with prompt, equitable, and safe access to COVID-19 testing that complies with CDC guidelines. And be it further resolved that this organization commends the City and County of Denver for proactively developing a mobile testing solution for the transit-dependent. And be it further resolved that this organization commits to work with other stakeholders, including groups advocating for the transit dependent and those with disabilities, to push for the creation of these services and develop proposals that include funding mechanisms, partnerships, and other ways to structure and fund effective testing systems.
Nate.
Yeah. So, you know, this, as you might pick up from pieces here and there, is developed from, in part because of personal experience. So we've had at least, we've had 3 incidents where testing was a prudent decision for my family, and the challenges of getting it done in a way that's safe, that doesn't violate the terms of service of different, you know, rideshare systems, or is consistent with the guidelines. Or in the case of when my younger daughter's daycare was shut down because of a COVID outbreak at the daycare, you know, the health order explicitly, you know, the quarantine order she got explicitly said, do not use any of these services. Actually, right now, my son has some cold symptoms that, you know, a year ago, we just write it off as a cold. But I've spent 4 days this week trying to find a friend that would be willing to drive him to get a test done, because you can't really stick your head out of the window on a Uber and let them do a test in the drive-through lane. They're not too keen on doing that. So there are solutions out there. I mean, Denver has the Wellness Winnie, which is a RV they had retrofitted for providing community health services, and they immediately retasked it to provide mobile testing because they recognized the need for it in the city and county of Denver. The state of Minnesota has rolled out a pilot program where they are, I don't know if it's FedEx, but some kind of quick shipping of saliva tubes for testing for people that are transit dependent, where you know, your doctor orders it, you'll have the tube the next day, you send it back that day, and you get your results back in 24 to 48 hours from then. There are solutions out there that don't require people to get in a car, and that's something that you know, it would be very helpful, I think, for you know, many people in the state.
Thank you, Nate.
Van
Move,
Dorn,
recommend, do
recommend
pass.
passage.
All right.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Renee?
I have a comment.
Renee first, and then Renee.
Okay.
Okay, the way the resolution states is that it is not available statewide to come to. We actually have up here in Eagle County, they come to your neighborhood. They don't come directly to your home, but they come to your neighborhood, and you can walk over. I have done it. So I don't know if that needs to be clarified different, or if it's okay the way it is.
Yeah, I definitely would. If that's erroneous, please feel free to update that.
I think that can be fixed.
Okay.
Excuse me. I think that can be fixed by just adding the word generally in front of the
Perfect
clause, because I think, generally speaking, mobile testing of any form is very rare.
Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then who else was seeking the floor?
Sandy.
Sandy.
So I have a comment because my daughter, when she went back to school, she's in Northwestern, they had to test them before they went to school, and they sent them a kit to test and did it through the mail. So I don't see why we couldn't do that for everybody else as well. That would eliminate our worrying about how we're going to get anywhere to test.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what that pilot program they rolled out in the state of Minnesota is doing. You know, a private university is creating their own system to do that, and that's fantastic. They established the partnerships and went out of their way and did that. I believe other universities around the country are doing the same thing. But the issue, of course, is access for the entire for the entire state.
Yeah.
Abdi.
Hey guys, I can actually answer that because I spoke with the Tri-County Health Department, which I think controls like Arapahoe, and they pretty much are the deciding factor on that home testing kit. And they were just, from again what I was told, they said that they did not feel comfortable or safe doing that, and that they just preferred people to come in and deal with medical professionals. And that to me was like them just saying, yeah, too bad, we're not going to do that. And then even then, I mean, if you find your way somehow, some way to get tested, I think the biggest problem for me was after I got tested, getting back, because I was like, I could just hop a bus, but now what? I can't catch an Uber. I can't do anything. So yeah, I definitely think this is a very important thing. So thank you, Nate, and thank you for the NFB of Colorado for taking this on. And let's hopefully get this done.
Thank you, Abdi. All right. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? All right. It's been recommended to pass on of committee. All right.
Excellent. Thank you. It's good to hear you, Abdi. Resolution 2020-05, also, Nate Trela is also the proponent for this. This is regarding the importance of universal accessibility for educational management and tools and learning systems that are used. I don't have to read the whole thing because you know what? Chris Parsons reads the entire title. Let's hear it.
Resolution 2020-05 regarding the importance of universal access to educational management systems and remote learning systems used by parents and students who are blind. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has forced a radical disruption of K-12 education, displacing hundreds of thousands of children who, under normal circumstances, would be attending in-person classes in public and private schools throughout Colorado and the nation. And whereas the sudden change in circumstances forced upon everyone by the pandemic has compelled educators to quickly design and implement new systems for remote learning, and whereas the ability to use these systems non-visually was not a primary concern at the time they were rolled out in March of 2020, and whereas blind parents across Colorado are reporting that the remote learning systems used to teach their children and the tools for communicating with parents are often difficult or impossible to use non-visually, and whereas the non-visual access issues experienced by blind parents and blind children may be unintentional, but they are nevertheless significant. For example, if a blind parent is not able to read a homework assignment, it is hard to imagine how the blind parent can help the child to complete the assignment. And by the same token, if the blind child is not able to read a homework assignment using non-visual access technology, it is unreasonable to expect the child to do his or her homework. And whereas non-visually accessible remote learning systems and communication strategies do exist and have already been shown to be viable strategies for remote learning and communication, not to mention being a legal requirement. And whereas the transition to greater use of digital curriculum learning management systems, and communication tools was already underway before the pandemic, and the use of these applications will likely remain an integral part of the education system going forward. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado and convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020 that this organization call upon the Colorado State Board of Education to develop a policy mandating school districts to make full accessibility a requirement when selecting educational technology and implementing websites and web-based applications. And be it further resolved that this organization call upon every school district in the state of Colorado to replace inaccessible remote learning and communication systems with systems that are fully accessible. And be it further resolved that this organization offer its expertise to schools and families to help educators and administrators to make decisions that ensure accessibility. And be it further resolved that this organization monitor complaints about non-visual access issues in K-12 education and respond appropriately to ensure that the rights and interests of blind parents and blind children are properly considered.
All right, Nate?
Yeah, again, this is not so much pointing out a personal experience, but as of things we've heard in the Blind Parents Division in the state about issues that parents have had with some of the systems that have been put in place since March. Obviously, things had to be adopted quickly when in-person schooling stopped being an option in the spring. But there certainly has been time for schools to revisit the platforms they have chosen to make sure that they're choosing things that are accessible. The complaints have been sporadic. I believe at the national level wasn't there an attempt to collect some data, collect complaints on this stuff. I don't know if anything has come of this yet. And I know we've talked about reaching out again at the state level to try to ask those same kinds of questions about accessibility. And we've taken up the issue of accessibility in ed tech before a couple of years ago with a resolution, I think 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's certainly worth revisiting because there definitely have been some selections that have been made that just, whether it's a blind student or blind parent, creates real barriers to access.
All right, thank you, Nate. Is there a motion?
Chong moved.
Seconded. Aragon.
Chong moved, Aragon second. Okay, is there further discussion?
Willoughby.
Aragon.
Willoughby and then Aragon.
I just want to point out, although I support the resolution, I think this resolution makes more demands on folks than people realize, and I question the statement that there is truly accessible software out there at all, anywhere. I know there's accessible to some people, but as our experience with the voting issue shows, it's very difficult for web designers to face the fact that they've got to stop using all these fancy tools. That's about all I have to say. So in other words, this commits us to finding out that it's truly accessible to all software, not just Windows software or Macintosh software.
Thank you, Curtis. JJ?
Hi. So I am at the University of Northern Colorado, and I want to share that for, I guess, template's sake, Canvas Student is probably the most accessible learning management software as far as I know. I have been very impressed with it. It works very well on iOS. It works very well on Windows. I'm not sure about Android, but I would imagine it works very well there. I know that a lot of schools use Blackboard, which is
Terrible.
gross. Yeah,
Yes.
Blackboard is awful. Blackboard isn't really good. I've heard complaints about Desire to Learn as well. So I just want to put out there that Canvas seems to be the most accessible platform. And also for blind teachers as well. Yep.
Thank you, JJ. Curtis?
I think the resolution is not going to fix all the accessibility issues. For example, there's nothing in there that mentions content, because even if you have the most accessible learning platform, if somebody puts a picture there up of a page of documentation that's just a picture, then the access becomes problematic. But I don't think that's what we're going to tackle, if everything. So I'm happy with the resolution as it is. I recommend we just go ahead and do it. Get it done. Send the message out.
You calling for the question then, Curtis?
Calling for the question.
All right. Been moved and seconded. All in favor of passing the resolution, please say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Any opposed? All right.
All right.
Resolution passes.
Thank you. All right. Resolution 2020-06. This has to do with CDLE, the Department of Labor and Employment, and some other, and BEP. And it's a long title, but I'll let Chris Parsons render it effectively. So let's hear. And this is Kevin Worley is the proponent for this.
Resolution 2020-06 regarding the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment's abject failure to appropriately collaborate with blind operators as required by law, causing injurious harm to a State of Colorado Opportunity Program and irreparable harm to Colorado's blind citizens. Whereas in 1936, Congress passed the Randolph-Shepard Act, which created a program to foster entrepreneurship for the blind on government property, and whereas the program is managed in Colorado by the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, CDLE, under designation from the United States Department of Education Rehabilitation Services Administration, and whereas in Colorado, the program is known as the Business Enterprise Program, BEP, for the blind and housed in the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR, within CDLE. And whereas business enterprise programs for the blind authorized by the Randolph-Shepard Act and companion state statutes have historically been the most successful employment program for the blind, and whereas in 2016, DVR was transferred in whole from the State Department of Human Services to CDLE, and whereas in 2016, the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado worked closely with the General Assembly and CDLE to pass HB 16-1048, sponsored by then Representative Diane Primavera, a law that was designed to usher in a new era of expansion for the program. However, after a much ballyhooed listening tour and series of strategic planning meetings between CDLE management and other state departments who would become beneficiaries of the new statute, absolutely no new business opportunities have been procured for the program by CDLE, and whereas the onset of the global pandemic has resulted in closure of the majority of the program's blind-operated businesses, as well as a dramatic loss of income to those who are still managing to operate, and whereas this crisis has also revealed a deep chasm of systemic mismanagement, particularly with regard to appropriate transparent accounting controls. And whereas during this crisis, upper management seems to have prevented highly qualified frontline business consulting staff from making even minor day-to-day decisions, bringing direct harm to blind operators and the customers they serve, while at the same time lowering the morale of staff. And whereas Title 34 Part 395.14b1 explicitly states that the agency must, in quotes, actively participate with the state licensing agency in major administrative decisions and policy and program development decisions affecting the overall administration of the state's vending facility program, end quote. And whereas, even with a lack of appropriate budgetary oversight, including the denial of active participation by blind operators, CDLE has moved forward with unusual speed in an effort to hire a new program manager against the will of blind operators. And whereas the elected committee of blind operators have been allowed only minimal tangential token involvement in the decision process and design of hiring protocol and procedures, resulting in finalists who, in the opinion of the elected committee, do not possess the appropriate experience, skills, and understanding to carry out management of such a complex and demanding program. And whereas even the job description itself is not adequate to ensure a pool of qualified candidates, including candidates who may happen to be blind or have other disabilities. And whereas the Colorado Business Enterprise Program has often been regarded as one of the finest in the nation, and whereas this recent egregious pattern of behavior on the part of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment must not be allowed to persist. Now, therefore be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado and convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020 that this organization roundly and strongly condemn and deplore the actions of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment for intentionally ignoring the hopes, dreams, wishes, capabilities, experiences, desires, and needs of Colorado's blind operators. And be it further resolved that we demand that the department take immediate steps to rectify this blatant violation of both the spirit and letter of the Randolph-Shepard Act. And be it further resolved that we demand unequivocally that the director of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment take an immediate and personal management and operational interest in the Business Enterprise Program, working in collaboration with leaders of the elected committee of operators, leaders of the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, and frontline Business Enterprise Program staff to bring about essential program reforms, including appropriate transparent transparent fiscal oversight, marketing, and collaboration with other state departments to expand the program as envisioned by the General Assembly in 2016, and other initiatives to stabilize and grow the program. And be it further resolved that we insist that CDLE immediately abandon the current flawed program manager search and selection process, and that CDLE commence a new transparent hiring process, including the development of an appropriate job description.
Well, I got to say, this is the probably roughest resolution I've ever had to write in my 38 years of writing resolutions in this organization. And it's interesting. I probably started writing resolutions before some of the people making decisions about our lives were alive, but that's, I suppose, neither here nor there, except that it's sad because I really respect some of these people a great deal. And it's sad because we really had been building a pretty great program. And yet there are things we were left unaware of. Our financials are ruined. Operators' lives are ruined. And what we're hearing from this agency is too bad, so sad. We're gonna send you chapter and verse of this rule, this reg, this policy, anything you want. We'll find a way to trip you up and crash you down. This is wrong. We've never had to deal with it. This goes back to Diane. This goes back to the 1980s. This kind of behavior, this is our program. It is not their program. We are under law allowing them to help us manage this program. That's the way they need to look at it. This is reprehensible stuff right here. And I'm going to tell you what, we're even hearing some rumors within the agency about reprisals for those blind vendors, the 21 of us who met on Monday afternoon, that our careers might even be in jeopardy. This is the kind of stuff that we haven't seen in Colorado in a long time. So I appreciate the support.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a motion to pass?
So moved.
Second.
It's Mary Ann. Seconds.
John seconds.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
Jody,
Jody?
I just want to go on record saying that I am respectively opting out of this one due to conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Thank you,
This is Diane. I was just sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, the struggles that the NFB of Colorado have had over the years, many of which I've been very closely involved with. as have lots of others who are on this call. And then, we thought we had really made some progress, and we did. We did make progress for a time. But it's very clear this resolution is needed. And I don't want to hear anything about reprisals. That's really terrible. Now, maybe it's just talk. I don't know, probably. Let's hope it is. If they're going to rue the day they did that one, I tell you. Anyway, I'm certainly in support of this resolution.
Thank you, Diane. Is there further discussion? All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor of passing this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
All right. I feel, that's kind of grim. I don't know. It's a long resolution, Kevin. I was going to tease you about it, but listening to it again for the 4th or 5th time, I can't make any jokes.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a shame.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, resolution 2020-07 is regarding the establishment of an office for disability accessibility in the Colorado Department of Transportation. Again, the proponent is Kevin Worley. Let's hear the resolution.
Resolution 2020-07 regarding the establishment of an office within the Colorado Department of Transportation to ensure access to state and local transportation by people with disabilities. Whereas Colorado citizens with disabilities have the same need to compete, participate, recreate, and engage in all manner of activities of life on equal terms with every other citizen. And whereas arguably one of the greatest impediments to engaging in activities of life and citizenship confronting Coloradans with disabilities is a persistent lack of accessible and affordable transportation. And whereas a new Colorado economy, advances in technology, the pandemic, and other factors are bringing significant changes in the way transportation systems are being researched, developed, and deployed under the coordination of the Colorado Department of Transportation, along with local authorities and both for-profit and nonprofit entities. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado and convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020 that this organization calls upon the Colorado Department of Transportation and the General Assembly to take such action as necessary to establish an accessible transportation and mobility office within the Colorado Department of Transportation to ensure that research, planning, licensing, and/or implementation of short and long-range transportation systems will substantially improve the accessibility of those systems for Coloradans with disabilities, as well as their availability to those Coloradans with disabilities living in rural or remote parts of the state.
All right, Kevin.
Kevin? We're not hearing you.
Maybe he got a call or something. Let me just say a few things about this. Kevin got this. You got it?
I've got it. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
You can feel free. I was just going to be fairly short. First of all, I wanted to say there's a couple of wordsmithing things we're going to have to do. I dashed this off fairly quickly, and I think Curtis and Dan or somebody pinged me saying, "Well, what is exactly what do we?" And I said, "Habada." We're good to go. And so this is
Can we quote you on that, by the way?
Well, I was going to put it in there, but Curtis,
we're recording this session.
Oh yeah,
Curtis took it off. So I actually stole this from the Tennessee affiliate. They brought this to the General Assembly and it passed, and they're in the midst of actually setting up the office. There's a hiring freeze, of course, in Tennessee, like there's many places, but they are working on the structure of it. And I just thought it's a trial balloon for our affiliate. It seems like with all the transport, CDOT's in the middle of everything transportation in the state, whether you could say it's local or not, but they're dealing with oversight of the roads and transportation systems and technologies. That's all CDOT. By the way, there's also business opportunities that we could work with CDLE to integrate. And so I think as we look into the future of what technology and lifestyles are going to change, the world's changing, guys. And some of us are still thinking that it's going to be, you know, back in the before times is going to come back again, and it's not. And so that's my notion, to set up an office within the department that both advocates and helps to research and deploy transit that works for people with disabilities.
This is Van Dorn.
Gary?
I do think this has merit. One thing I've found being the chair of the transit committee is transit is very complex. And at the root of all transit is the Department of Transportation on the state as well as the federal level, because of the regulatory structures and frameworks they look at. When I'm thinking of RTD, and I can speak for other cities, it's not as easy as what people think on where highways go, where buses go, where trains go. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of study. There's a lot of public input. And it's just not putting people on a bus and a driver going up and down Broadway or Lincoln. I think that the concerns that I've expressed to Kevin, he did address, and we even agreed on some of them. One of the concerns I addressed to Kevin is how would we get this through the General Assembly, considering Colorado has a distaste for creating additional bureaucracy. I also would like to see the Tennessee statute, Kevin. You haven't had a chance to send that to me yet because of the convention. But I think this is something we should consider.
All right, thank you, Gary. Is there a motion?
Do pass. Van Dorn.
Van Dorn. It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion?
Renee,
Renee?
I think this sounds like a great thing, because I know living in rural areas, there is a huge disconnect on how to do transportation, accessible transportation. And what I would like to, I'm hoping that if this does pass, that there will be more than just the metro area focused on, because the rurals really need it. I mean, I'm one person in this county, and I got them to finally put seatbelts on paratransit after they're going 75 miles an hour on I-70 and no seatbelts. And so there's just all these different things I think that need to truly be affecting the rural areas as well.
Warley, with one last comment on this, Renee, I was thinking about you when I was writing this, when I heard about it from Tennessee, when I was repping their convention. I was thinking about you. I was thinking about Pueblo. I was thinking about people all over the state. And you're absolutely right. And this would be more than the resolution is general enough that we will now take this as a policy if it passes, and we will work with our champions in the General Assembly and folks at CDOT, and we'll fashion the best program that we possibly can. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to let's see what we can do with it.
Willoughby?
Curtis.
I know what has happened to a lot of situations. When you create an office, they bury it under 7 layers of management. I think legislative history-wise, we need to insist on this being at the top level of the organization, right below the executive director or whatever the top bird is.
We will craft a program that we can get through.
Thank you, Curtis and Kevin. All right.
Call the question. Van Dorn.
Let's call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
By the
All
way,
right.
Scott, I assume if you had something of particular germane to you would have gotten a word in there. So I assume that we can take this to the General Assembly if it passes in some form or fashion.
Absolutely.
But please do send the Tennessee statute to us, Kevin.
Yeah, I heard you, Gary.
Okay. We're coming up on our last resolution. I want to acknowledge Chris Parsons' recordings of reading these. She did a great job.
Go, Chris.
Especially considering that we asked her to do this Wednesday when there's a senior meeting that she had to host, and plans for the senior seminar and the blind parents where she's doing presentations, and she managed to squeeze this in just because she loves reading the resolutions so much. So thank you, Chris.
It's water off a duck's back for her. She's a pro.
I know. She's a parent. She's a blind parent, and she can do everything all at once.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like that was the mom in The Incredibles, the Elastigirl or whatever her name was, doing all that different things. All right. So thanks, Chris, and thanks to Curtis and Paul for managing this meeting so well. I kind of like having the resolutions recorded for this because if there are any issues with connectivity, then we don't experience them in quite the same way.
So move. Let's do it in the future. I'm all for it.
Let's hope we're not doing a meeting by connectivity next time. Also, we didn't really acknowledge this, but we did, Scott wanted us to get these out early to people to be able to read in advance. So they've been available through our listserv and on our website. We don't typically share them in advance. We usually bring them right to the committee and discuss them, but I think the extraordinary times call for doing that. And I hope that everybody availed themselves of to study up on these early. So without further ado, then, the final resolution 2020-08 is authored by none other than our president, Scott LaBarre, regarding equal access to the, what is it called? Regarding the Equal Access to the Web Act. So let's hear that resolution and then have Scott speak to it.
Resolution 2020-08 regarding Equal Access to the Web Act. Whereas equal access to websites, mobile apps, and other information technology is imperative to living in today's world, implicating every area of daily life, including education, shopping, employment, entertainment, public health, and safety information, and much, much more. And whereas assistive technology used by the blind, such as text-to-speech technology, allows the blind to gain access to information as efficiently, comfortably, and easily as the sighted. And whereas, however, most websites, mobile apps, and other information technology are either entirely inaccessible using assistive technology or possess significant access barriers. And whereas existing civil rights laws, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act, broadly mandate equally effective communication with those who are disabled, but generally there are no clear regulations and laws regarding how websites, mobile apps, and other information technology can comply with these civil rights laws. And whereas global standards, such as the World Wide Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and the regulations promulgated pursuant to Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act exist and inform owners and operators of websites, mobile apps, and other information technology how to provide their information in an accessible manner. And whereas to ensure equal access for those who are blind, it is necessary to adopt such standards into law. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado in convention assembled this 31st day of October 2020 that we urge the Colorado General Assembly to pass into law an Equal Access to the Web, Mobile Apps, and Other Information Technology Act, which would incorporate into law the most recent WCAG and Section 508 standards. And be it further resolved that we insist that any Web Accessibility Act include the full measure of relief and remedies available under law, including but not limited to all non-economic damages, injunctive relief, and attorney fees and costs.
All right. Scott?
Thank you, Dan. This resolution is a result of some discussions we have been having at a national level, and it's also in response to a crisis that has been building for a couple of different reasons. You know, everybody knows that, generally speaking, websites and other information technology, mobile apps, so on, should be accessible, and that the law really mandates that. The problem is that there aren't, in many cases, a lot of clear standards in law about how to do this, especially with respect to private entities. And so we need to have an affirmative strategy to deal with this. And the other problem that has come into play is, and I'm sure you've heard about these so-called click-buy lawsuits, where lawyers are filing a bunch of complaints all at one time against owners and operators of websites, and settling these cases for a little bit of money and not really getting any relief or injunctive relief to remedy the true problems. So I think what we need to do here in Colorado is pass a model Web Accessibility Act that can address a lot of these issues. And this resolution would give us the ability to go forward to the General Assembly and start advocating for this proposal. So that's why I have brought it. There's a lot more that goes into this, but, you know, we're getting towards the end of our time, so I guess I'll stop there. I do want to say in a general sense about this process that, first of all, I am so proud of this affiliate. If you look at these resolutions we have, we have so much talent, and the resolutions are well written. The ideas are very thorough, and I really appreciate everybody's work on this committee and those who have brought resolutions. I also want to say that, Dan, I think we should make a note when we do the final copy on these that, you know, we make a note of the fact that we did do these virtually. In all our resolutions in the past, we say what city we're in and so on and so forth. So I think we'll incorporate language that says that we're in virtual convention or via Zoom platform or something, just to make that note. With regard to putting these resolutions out in advance, I don't think that should be a one-time thing. I think we need to do that every year. And the reason we don't, quite frankly, is, sometimes when you're involved in an organization and you got a lot of busy people, people wait till the last minute to get things done. And that's what always seems to happen with respect to our resolution process. So going forward, I'm going to insist that we exercise self-discipline and have the resolutions done at least a few days in advance so that we can get them out there, because I think it really does help for people to be able to look at these issues before they come into the committee meeting. And other than that, I would just want to thank Chris and everybody who's worked on these, Dan, Brent, and, everybody else. So thank you so much. All right. That's all I've got to say on Resolution 2020-08.
Thank you, Scott.
Chong moves the adoption.
I'll second that.
Seconds.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I would like to, this is Dula.
Dula?
I would like to see deaf blind people definitely be covered under this. I know personally that I just got new hearing aids, and the application for it, when we called the company, they flat out said, now I don't use VoiceOver, I use Voice Assistant, but when we called and talked to them, they flat out said, VoiceOver does not work with this application. And I think that's just ridiculous.
Right. And I think, Dula, it is written broadly enough that certainly that would be the case. And certainly, if WCAG guidelines are followed and 508 guidelines and standards are followed, it does bring accessibility to the deafblind as well as basically anybody with a disability.
All right. I just want to make sure that that section gets covered.
I confirm that.
Willoughby,
Thank you, Julie. Curtis?
does anybody know what those gobbledygook resolution citations require?
It's a book, Curtis. You don't want to go over that right now. Essentially,
I
it
don't
says-
want to go over it right now. I'm just saying, does it require that JavaScript not be used, for example?
I don't think they get down to that level.
Yeah,
Well, then it probably doesn't cover all of us.
No, it does. It focuses on the functionality. In other words, what you're supposed to be able to do, which is different from specifying a specific language or code.
Yes, the WCAG 2.1 AA standards and the 508 standards are all functional. They're not prescriptive of any platform, quite frankly.
All right. Thank you.
Call for the
Maybe
question.
we need somebody to cough up a bundle of money to fix the web browsers that are not compatible with what they're requiring.
All right, thank you, Curtis. And I did hear call for the question. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, 2020-08 passes on to committee.
Excellent. That completes our work for the committee, I believe, unless there's anything else that we need to bring forward. Scott?
Well, all I'd like to say now, Dan, is since we've completed this work, let's now look forward to hearing from our exhibitors and sponsors at the top of the hour, our so-called Hour of Power, where you'll get to hear from a variety of different organizations doing just quite a diversity of different things, and I think it'll be a great hour. And then after that, you'll have an opportunity to visit these entities directly in their own Zoom rooms. So, go out, get your early lunch if that's what you need, or another cup of coffee, or whatever the case may be, a biological break, and let's be back at the top of the hour.